Mr. Stone, o que o senhor descobriu filmando ao sul da fronteira o seu mais recente documentário?
I found out a lot that I didn't know. I'll tell you the truth, most North Americans don't understand what has been happening in South America in the last 10 years. When I came here in 2009 to interview Hugo Chavez, with my friend Fernando Sulichin, who had produced several of my documentaries before, we talked to Hugo about the changes in Venezuela, the nationalizations. He said, go out and talk to the people who are changing the whole South American continent, not just me. We went and visited 7 presidents in 5 countries.
Ao sul da fronteira, ao seu documentário, houve algumas críticas que o documentário ele tem uma visão muito condescendente, algo ingênua em relação à América Latina. Seria como se a América Latina fosse vítima dos Estados Unidos, do FMI e das suas elites. Como é que o senhor responde a essa crítica de uma visão ingênua sobre a América Latina?
I think that's a disingenuous criticism and to destroy the credibility of the film. The film takes the contrary view. The South Americans should be proud of their independence. The entire movie is dedicated to the idea of South American independence. And Lula himself in the movie says he fought the IMF. The International Monetary Fund is considered an enemy. He does not want to be a victim of the IMF. He says, I paid off the debt of the IMF, and you know what? They came back, they wanted me not to pay off the debt so they could stay hooked like a drug addict on their money. In the last few years, the IMF has been funding South America to the tune of $20 billion a few years ago. That debt is now down to $1 billion. That's independence. When you can get out from the economic boot of the United States, that's when you're going to have independence. And that's what Hugo Chavez, Evo Morales, Correa, Kirchner, and Nestor Kirchner is a hero here. You've got to give him credit. There's a unity to all these leaders, and that's the beauty of the movie. What I find when I travel in South America is all the little petty infighting between these countries and all the parties. You end up fighting among yourselves, and you destroy the unity of this movement, this what Hugo calls the Bolivarian revolution. Your countries have come so far up in the last few years. This is a good new beginning. Do not go back, is what we're saying.
O senhor teve um encontro com a ministra Dilma, ex-ministra Dilma Rousseff, na última terça-feira em Brasília. Qual foi a sua impressão dela e se o senhor votasse no Brasil, votaria na ministra Dilma?
I don't know the issues in Brazil. I can only tell you I met her as a person. In an hour's meeting, I met a woman who was forthright, who's determined. She struck me as focused, and I see that in the best of the world leaders. Obama has that ability to focus.
E agora uma pergunta mais profissional sobre atores profissionais. Desses presidentes que o senhor entrevistou, qual deles lhe pareceria o melhor ator profissional que o senhor gostaria de trabalhar no filme?
Well, the biggest star was Hugo. As an actor, yes, he was the leading man, but I honestly think the documentary is about other things than Hugo. He's exciting, but you have to say the supporting cast is incredible. Evo Morales, where do you find an actor? He's a wonderful face and a wonderful presence. He looks like the people who elected him. He's also a very strong man. I love his strength. He's suffered. He was tortured in prison, you know. He was in prison, and he's a labor union leader, and he never gave up, and he ruptured relations with the United States, which takes guts. Correa has guts. He went up against the United States. He said, if you want a military base in Ecuador, I want one in Miami. And he's taken on Colombia, and Colombia is a violator of this idea of a new South America. They've allowed the Obama to expand again to 7 military bases, expanded 7 military bases the U.S. has in Colombia. This is a big issue for most of South America, except for Garcia in Peru. But you know, Lula, he has strength and enormous power, personality and determination. And I love Cristina. She's a wonderfully smart, articulate woman. So there they go. I mean, they're all powerful.
Como jornalista, a profissão o obriga muito a tentar um ponto de vista neutro. Como cineasta, o senhor acha que é correto tomar uma parte e mostrar o que o senhor acha?
In the south of the border movie, which you saw, about 20 minutes of that movie is criticism of Chavez from the opposition. Hysterical criticism, mostly from the United States, but we have Venezuelan criticism constant. So I mean, there's so much that you can do in a movie where I'm trying to give a positive message. One is the good thing that he's doing. One of the powerful changes that are in effect in South America. I am concentrating on the big picture.
Eu queria saber a sua opinião sobre a questão cubana. O senhor fez documentários para televisão sobre Cuba. O presidente Lula tem dito ao presidente Barack Obama, que acha que o fim do bloqueio americano a Cuba. Eu queria a sua opinião. Cuba é uma ditadura? O que o senhor pensa sobre o fim do bloqueio? O que o senhor acha do Fidel? Como o senhor vê a questão cubana como um todo?
Well, Cuba is not a democracy in the sense that we think of South American democracy, and I think Hugo Chavez is a sterling example of a democracy because he's had more elections than any single leader and he's won every one. It's ironic that he's called a dictator in America. That shows you how silly it is. Whereas on the Bush-Gore election, I am convinced Al Gore won that election. And I think the Supreme Court pulled a coup d'etat by putting Bush in. In Venezuela, you vote electronically and then you have a paper ballot on top of it. What could be more democratic than that? It becomes so silly. Democracy is often used as a front by the United States in its war to destabilize the country. They go with democracy and then they go with human rights and censorship. Those become that's the way to get in. Or drugs, the war on drugs. That's the way you get into a country. Before you know it, you're subject to the United States. I think that Chavez and Lula are right. Stand up for your rights. You don't have to be supervised. Respect the people. And frankly, Castro has taken care of his people in many ways. He's faced a strangling embargo. Medicine has been denied, food has been denied. It's illegal, it's immoral, it's been immoral from the beginning. It's been condemned by practically every international organization, and America continues to do it. So America has no respect for international opinion in this matter. It's a terrible example, and it's hurt the country, and as a result, it's helped Castro create an enemy and preserve his image as a power. And I think there's many abuses in Cuba, but not of the kind you think. It's not the country that you think it is. It's still a very strong, vibrant country with a strong anti-corporate point of view. Of course,
acho que tem problema muito grave do ponto de vista das liberdades. É uma ditadura com presos políticos, né?
Oh, come on. If you are this mouse 60 miles from America looking at this giant for 50 years trying to destroy you, actively with one invasion, and the second invasion was planned in 1962. It almost came to the edge of nuclear war. You've had almost more than 12 assassination attempts against Fidel. What? Is this fair? I mean, put yourself, walk in the shoes of Cuba. See where they're at. This is what I do as a director. This is what's lacking in some journalists. They don't have the empathy to understand what that country has gone through. China can get away with it, but Cuba is small.
Mr. Stone, o senhor nasceu em Nova York em 1946, logo depois da Segunda Guerra Mundial. Teve ali influências que o levaram para a guerra do Vietnã. Eu queria saber o que motivou o senhor, quando jovem, a ir para o Vietnã e o que o fez mudar de opinião sobre a guerra. Como foi esse processo?
Well, I guess you could say it was a classic case of American brainwashing. Education was. My father was a hardcore conservative, believed in American business values, and I believed all that, and I went to the best schools and all that, and I realized that I didn't like many of the people in my own class. There was something wrong. I don't know what I wanted, I just didn't like them. George Bush was in my class at Yale, to show you the kind of people who were entitled. I don't like those people. Didn't then, didn't now. So I left, and I didn't want it in the world, and I found out for myself. I went to a war I thought was right at the time. I was taught to believe that. I was educated in the belief that communism was a conspiracy out to destroy the United States. One monolithic conspiracy, which was the conspiracy theory of all time, by the way, because it's all bullshit right now. And it didn't work out that way, nor was Vietnam that way. So, my education is a process of disillusionment and alienation from the values that I had been raised with. But that's not to say I don't value some of the things I was raised with. And I love many things in America. I love its madness, its freedom, its excess sometimes. I love the concept that you can go there and you can try and make something of yourself. You can change your life, and the idea of acquiring, making money. Freedom is another word, and I would be very careful with the use of the word freedom, because a lot of freedom is economic freedom. And America is very good at supplying consumer goods. But is that real freedom? We've become locked into a huge system. It's a bit of a tyranny. We are told who to vote for. We only have two parties, and the two parties don't necessarily represent change or reform.